My name is Michael Calabrese. I direct the Wireless Future program here at New America. And this event, of course, is on broadband transparency. We will be discussing the critical importance of broadband transparency for network research, for empowering and protecting users, and as a means of providing empirical data to help policymakers sustain a robust and innovative internet well into the future. More specifically, today's event is the launch for Measurement Lab, which is a new open server platform that enables researchers to deploy internet measurement tools. The goal of MLab is to advance network research and empower the public with useful information about their broadband connections. Today, when an internet application isn't working as expected, it's difficult even for network administrators to know whether the problem is caused by your broadband connection, by some practice of the ISP, for example, by the application, or by something else. It can be very difficult for experts, let alone for average internet users, to answer this sort of question today. Both internet consumers and researchers deserve to be well informed about the performance of their broadband connections. And to do so, they'll need new tools like those being launched today as part of MLab. My colleague, Sasha Meinrath, will walk us through the MLab toolkit in just a bit. But before introducing Vint Cerf, I do want to emphasize that MLab is the result of a very broad-based collaboration among network researchers at leading academic centers, internet companies, particularly Google, who we would wish to thank, and advocates of an open, innovative internet. So first up will be Vint Cerf. Vint is Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist at Google, a fitting title since Vint is widely known as the founding father of the Internet. For many years, he has been urging greater transparency, measurement, and study of Internet usage. And in fact, the MLab tools that will be unveiled today grew out of a workshop of leading thinkers that Vint hosted at the Googleplex last June. After Vint's opening remarks, we'll hear from representatives of three primary partners in this initiative: New America's Sasha Meinrath, who directs our Open Technology Initiative, Larry Peterson, who directs the Planet Lab Consortium, and Ed Felton, who directs the Center for Information Technology Policy at Princeton. So we'll start with Vint.
Thank you, Michael.
Welcome.
It's a special treat for me because I have actually not been to the New America Foundation facility, so thank you for a very kind introduction and also for hosting this event. I want to start out just by saying that it's important to emphasize how collaborative this effort has been. This is not a one-person or a one-group initiative. It is a coalition of people who really care about how the Internet works. I've been around for quite a long time, since the early stages of the Internet. I watched it grow from 3 networks to hundreds of thousands of them. And I have to be honest and tell you that it got more complicated as it got bigger, and it got harder to figure out what went wrong if something wasn't working as you would expect it to. So part of the effort here is to reinstitute our ability to observe the way in which networks behave, particularly the Internet, in order to empower everyone, including users, to understand more fully what it is that's going on. There are a number of groups that have participated in this work. Michael alluded to several. The New America Foundation is one of them. Google is another. Planet Lab is another. And other researchers at universities and institutions. We actually started thinking about this a year ago in January and had some internal meetings talking about whether it was possible for us to create an environment in which data could be gathered and which would be open so that other people who have ideas about capturing information to analyze the behavior of the net could participate. The researchers, and Larry, of course, is an example of that community, researchers trying to understand either how the network now works or how it could work or how new network architectures could work, have been at something of a loss since the National Science Foundation network was terminated in 1995, over 10 years ago. Under the regime of the NSF, all the data about the network performance was made available to network researchers. So they had a live in situ source of information, but that went away, became a very commercial activity. Details about how things actually worked in the live commercial networks were often considered proprietary. When Larry started Planet Lab, he created an environment in which more information could be gathered about the performance of new ideas in the system. And I don't want to take any thunder away from Larry. I'll let him talk about the relationship between the M-Lab or measurement lab ideas, Planet Lab, and his own contributions. The thing I want to emphasize here is that transparency is our goal. Our intent is to make it more visible for all who are interested about the way in which the network is functioning at all layers in its architecture. I used to joke about wanting to have a button on my machine that I could push when I couldn't figure out why things weren't performing the way I expected them to, and then have the system run sort of a commander data level 1 diagnostic that would tell me where the bottleneck was, or what was it that was not functioning, or what was reachable and what wasn't reachable. Frankly, the tools that are available are geeky in the extreme. You can run low-level things that ping somebody to see if you can even get a packet to them or not, or you can try to trace the route that your traffic is taking from where you are to wherever it is the server is. But interpreting the results of that is actually quite difficult, as Michael pointed out earlier. So our purpose in creating the M-Lab is to contribute to make one step towards the ability to introduce new tools for measurement and analysis, and also to help capture data. Now, I have to tell you that we're still quite a long ways from having all the pieces that are going to be needed. For example, the measurement lab can house tools that can capture data. It can house the data for a while. But as you can imagine, on a network the scale of the internet, an awful lot of data could be consumed, and even Google isn't prepared to absorb all of it. So we're going to have to build additional mechanisms, and by we, I mean the consortium that's participating in this. We'll have to build additional mechanisms to take the live data and put it in an archive where other people can get access to it, can run analytical tools against it, and use it either to improve or understand the existing network operation, or in fact to think about ways to design new instances of the internet. I should point out to you that there is a major activity going on at the National Science Foundation called FIND, and Larry, it's a Future Internet Design, is that the acronym? David Clark from MIT is a major participant in that. Informing the design of anything new is an essential step. If you're an engineer, if you don't have any data, you have no idea, how good or bad your new ideas are. So gathering information about the current performance of the net is really important. So I just want to emphasize several other things, and then we'll turn this over to Sasha to show us how this thing works. One of them is that the M-Lab is a kind of surrogate for people who want to design and build new kinds of measurement and analysis tools. So the source of the creativity is going to come from outside. It will come from people who haven't yet even been participant in this program. If we've learned anything at Google, and maybe we can even say anything about the internet in general, it's that an open and accessible network induces and invites creativity and innovation. We'd like to keep it that way. We'd like the network to stay a very open environment where anyone who wants to try things out is free to do so. And that includes people who have ideas for gathering data about the network's performance. So our intent is to create this innovative and open environment, and to allow others to invent new ways of capturing and analyzing and displaying the information. And maybe in the long run we'll get to the point where ordinary users will be able to usefully ask questions about the performance of the network. Michael mentioned broadband several times, but let me tell you that the network is accessible in a wide range of ways. Sometimes it isn't broadband. Sometimes it's narrowband, especially if you're using a PDA on a kind of a GPRS 19 kilobit link. But performance is still important to you, even in that case. And so the full range of internet performance is subject to measurement and analysis, and I hope we'll see tools that cover that full range as the project unfolds. So I'm going to stop and thank you all, by the way, for coming and joining us in this announcement of the new MLab, and turn this over to Mr. Meinrath, who is going to show off how some of these tools work and how others will be coming. Okay, so go for it.
Well, thanks everyone for braving the weather and coming out today. We were extremely worried that there'd be like 3 of us hanging out, like introducing this to another 3 of you. Let me first start by saying that I'm deeply honored to be working with the colleagues that have been pulled together on this project and whose depth of knowledge and expertise when it comes to understanding and analyzing the internet and its operations is completely unparalleled. I am wowed every day that I'm working with these folks by just the insane amount of understanding that they bring to these problems. And it's great because I learn new things every moment that I'm on this project. So in bringing together industry resources and sort of the uber geeks on the one hand and the policy wonks on the other, I think, you know, Vint and Google acted as an incredibly important catalyst for an initiative that has the power to greatly enhance our field, the whole field of internet research, and improve our understanding of its core functionality, its capacities, its sustainability, and growth of broadband services. For our own part, the New America Foundation is launching a new endeavor, which is the Open Technology Initiative, and our role in the MLab project is really to help convene this research community, bring folks together, herd the cats, as it were, and also to translate the work, this incredibly important work that people are doing for policymakers and regulators who are often making critically important decisions and have, as Stevens exemplifies, a very limited understanding perhaps of the network architectures at play. So in essence, OTI is sort of MLab's force multiplier. Like, we're here to ensure that the findings and the research results from this platform are heard and understood by key decision makers, and that policies are based upon the best available data that our scientific community can bring to bear. So hopefully this begs the question, if we've brought together this incredibly elite group of network scientists, this group that is preeminent in the world for the work that they're doing, and our goal is to inform policymaking at the highest levels, what have we been building to allow them to do this work? And the answer is this Measurement Lab project, which is a state-of-the-art global network of servers that's going to create an open platform, or is an open platform for scientists to develop and deploy measurement tools. Now, we're starting modestly. So today we're launching with 3 servers at an undisclosed location in Mountain View, California. And within the next 6 months, we will expand this, and this is where Google's really been critical as a catalyst, to 36 servers in 12 locations around the globe. But our goal is actually to move far beyond that. Google is one partner, an incredibly important partner, but our goal is to actually add more industry players that want to help with this endeavor to make the internet more transparent. And MLab itself is an incredibly transparent and participatory initiative. So our goals are not just to make broadband data publicly available, but also to actively invite other researchers, industry partners, ISPs, public interest groups, anyone that is interested in taking part in this, to join this effort. So our current steering committee, I think, helps exemplify that. You know, we have some Googlers, we've got myself from New America, but we've also got a number of researchers from places all over the place. So we've got like Richard Carlson from Internet 2, we've got Konstantin Dovralis from Georgia Institute, along with Nick Feemster from over there. We've got Krishna Gumandi from Max Planck Institute, Alexander Kumanovic from Northwestern University, Matt Mathis from Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center, Larry Peterson from the Planet Lab Consortium, and a host of others. I see Mark's over there that are helping out behind the scenes. And this really exemplifies this global effort that has been brought together for this project. So now what I'm going to do is just walk you through a couple of these tools so you can get a feel for the types of information that this brings out and makes explicitly available to people. And anyone, if you're in the room here or online at home, you can get onto Measurement Lab right now and run these tools as well. So if you are a user or an interested person, you can just click on this link here to test your internet connection, and it'll pop up the tools. We actually have 3 tools that are active right now and 2 others that are coming in the very near future. And there's explanations for each of those. I won't run through all of them. But if you wanted to run, say, the network diagnostic tool, actually, I might just run this one because it only takes a moment in time to do. Here it is, and this is kind of like, like the full Monty here at New America. Hope our internet connection won't be bad. Yeah, of course, this has happened before, so it won't start. Luckily, I anticipated that, so. Oh no, this one's gone too.
So this is real software because
and this is why we are beta, of course. So let's go back then to Glassnose. And this, by the way, we actually found this before and attempted to track it down, but when we tracked it down, it worked fine. So,
of course.
yes. So we'll do Glassnose then. So this is a BitTorrent checker, and if you've been following the news and telecommunications, you've probably seen Comcast was caught throttling peer-to-peer traffic in BitTorrent in particular. They denied it. People developed tools to check this, found that this was a widespread practice, and after several months said, Comcast said, okay, yes, we were doing that, and now we have stopped. So Glassnose is kind of a tool that anyone can run to see if their networks themselves are also suffering from the same sort of deprioritization of BitTorrent-like traffic. This tool actually takes about 7 minutes to run, so I'll just show you some results here. This would be what, once you've run the test, this would be what you would see. And you can see here, this was actually run from my office downstairs on the New America network, and I'm happy to report that New America is not preventing me from using BitTorrent and other peer-to-peer file sharing, nor is my ISP here. And so it checks not only sort of the main port that BitTorrent uses, but alternative ports, and checks a variety of different metrics. This, on the other hand, would be a test that has failed to meet criteria. And this is because it was sent on a ridiculously long loop that no one would ever want to actually follow. But again, it tells you information about your connection point. We're going far beyond just sort of your upload and download speeds to look at root causes as to why you might be suffering from congestion or a slow speed. So the NDP test that I can't get to run on Ubuntu, but certainly will run on most computers, that will tell you not only sort of your upload, download speeds, but where along these routes you might be suffering from congestion. What's the root cause of this? Is it some sort of server setting that might be detrimentally impacting your service, etc.? And you can imagine that not only is this useful for end users, for the average customer that can then check and see what's going on with my own internet connection, not only is it useful for researchers who are trying to understand, like, what's going on the internet as a network, because we have so little information available to them, but it's also incredibly useful to ISPs. The amount of time and energy and thus money that is spent troubleshooting people's lines is extraordinary. You talk to anyone that's ever deployed a network, and I've done wireless networks, so I know this firsthand, huge amounts of your time and energy are spent working with customers to attempt to troubleshoot what has gone awry. And so these tools help them as well. And it's that part of this collaboration of bringing everyone together and working on all these issues and bringing the research community here and bringing the results from research to the people that are making decisions at the highest levels that we are most excited about with MLab. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to...
Before you do that, may I? Is this thing working?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so I can't resist making a couple of observations. These are pretty geeky tests and results that are showing up. And so before you decide, well, this is nuts, I'll have to hire a geek in order to figure out what's going on, which you'd have to do anyway, right? Think for just a moment about the possibility that this data could be made available to someone who is trying to help you, but instead of getting anecdotal information from you about, gee, this seems slow or something is not behaving the right way, you could actually forward this kind of information to the person who's trying to help you diagnose the problem. So just as a matter of good customer service, you might actually wind up speeding up your ability to help a customer because you have some raw data coming from the customer's point of view. And so even though a customer might not be able to personally interpret what this means, someone on the other end might be able to do that. And then if you think for a moment about a number of people, if they're willing to share the information as part of an archive, then the network researchers have an opportunity to mine the information to try to understand more global behavior patterns in the net. So as odd as this might look, it has very, very definite practical value. And in the end, maybe this will allow people to start business, like call a geek in order to figure out what's wrong with their internet connection.
Thanks, Vint.
Larry.
Let me turn it over to a real live researcher who can tell you more about the import of this to the community of scientists.
Thank you. So you can tell I'm the real live researcher because I'm the one not wearing a tie.
Smart ass.
So I want to talk about IMLab and generally what we're doing here from the researcher's perspective. The research community for some time now has, well, let me put it this way. The internet was at one time the playground for researchers. It's the experiment that escaped from the lab. And after it escaped, researchers stopped being able to tinker with it in the same way that we had been during its early days. And increasingly shut out and difficult to see the data. It was difficult for us to innovate, for that matter. The internet was moving at a commercial pace and for commercial reasons. And a lot of decisions were made for those reasons, and the research community has been a bit on the sidelines. And what that sort of came to a head for me personally and for some of my colleagues about 6 or 7 years ago, and we were wishing that we had the ability to be out there in the network, both for the sake of looking at what the network was doing, the sorts of things that IMLab is going to give us a greater insight into, measure the topology of the internet, measure how it's failing, measure how it's connected, the delay characteristics, who's being throttled, who's not being throttled. So there was a lot of desire to have vantage points throughout the internet from which we could observe the internet's behavior, because I get a very, very narrow view of the internet just sitting in my lab or at my desktop. And the second thing we wanted to do was to be able to then innovate and say, if the internet was just different in this way, I wonder what would happen, or I wonder if I could solve this problem, whether it is a security problem or a delay problem or a bandwidth problem or whatever. If we could innovate, then we might have an opportunity to design new protocols, new services, maybe even conjure up a new architecture or ways to augment the current architecture. So as a consequence of this kind of thinking, some colleagues and I set off and established a consortium and a platform called Planet Lab. And don't have a picture to point to, but imagine a picture of the globe with about 1,000 dots on it worldwide, across all continents, not so much in Africa yet, but pretty much everywhere else, where there are machines, servers, that researchers have access to. And they can basically take their experiments and upload onto these servers, and these can be experiments that measure today's internet and try to characterize its behavior. And that is finding some shortcomings there and some weaknesses in how we did that led to many of the improvements that are going to showing up in IMLab. And at the same time, we could upload our vision of what the internet might be, and we could run that. And in fact, that turned out to be a little bit more successful than we anticipated. We actually started to attract users. And there's about 4 terabytes of data, 4 to 6 terabytes of data every day flowing through Planet Lab on behalf of about 1 million internet users, running through experimental services that might be part of tomorrow's internet. Well, those kinds of experiments require and depend upon access to data. And so our ability to see the internet, not just from the 1,000 points that we have control of, but from the millions and millions of points that are beyond our reach out there at the edges where the real users are, at the end of their broadband connections and the end of their wireless connections and so on. It's just an immensely important set of data that we need access to. And so IMLab is building a little bit on some of the software we've had in Planet Lab, but it takes it quite a bit further in the precision with which we'll be able to measure the internet. And also just the approach of doing our very best to get the public involved. And so now, with the incentive of being able to diagnose your own internet behavior and failures and what's working, what's not working, you will be able to, or the public will be able to do these different, run these different diagnostics tools, and we, the research community, will be able to see the results of that in aggregate now. And so it's not just why did my link fail, but or not perform well, but I now see across the research community will be able to see across the entire internet what is and is not working. That informs our ability to maybe design the next service, the next protocol, build the next better mousetrap, whatever it might be, and then the whole process iterates. And so we're all about collecting the data, trying new designs, seeing what does and does not work, collecting data from that, and on it goes. And we have actually seen the results of much of this research start to find its way back into commercial offerings. And it's not that we expect one day we'll turn off the old internet and turn on the new one, but it's a continual process of migrating ideas across from the academic community, from the research community into the commercial offerings. And quite frankly, the ability to then actually see those with the transparency that an MLab will give us is an important confirmation that what we've done is actually having an impact and is actually working. So I don't mean to completely divorce what the academic community wants to do from the policy. There's a joke that I quite often tell that if you don't know, for university researchers, if you don't know the name of your university's general counsel, you're not doing network research. It's from a policy point of view, the research community is dramatically impacted by what we are and are not allowed to see and to do. And so one of the biggest problems that we see on Planet Lab, and we're anticipating being able to deal with these sorts of problems on MLab, is just the reaction that we get because someone sees us probing, someone sees us poking around in the internet, wondering what is it you're up to. And so we field a lot of complaints, if you will. What's going on? This is a little bit unusual. Well, that's the nature of research. We're trying new things out. And we run into a lot of issues as to, well, should you be able to do that sort of experiment or not? That kind of question comes up a lot for us, and I'm anticipating that we will now be able to deal with those kinds of questions in the context of MLab as well. And so with that, I guess I'll let my colleague Ed Felton say a few words.
Thanks. Well, I'm wearing a tie today, so I must be in policy wonk mode. So let me talk a little bit about some of the impacts of Measurement Lab and broadband transparency efforts generally on public policy debates around the internet. And as an example, I want to use the network neutrality debate. Now, I'm going to argue that no matter what position you take on network neutrality, you should be happy that things like Measurement Lab are being built and will be used. Because if you believe that network neutrality regulations are needed, that government should do more should take more active steps to mandate network neutrality, then you should be happy about Measurement Lab because it will help you gather the evidence you need to support government action in this area. That is, Measurement Lab will help you understand what ISPs are doing, what performance users are seeing, what behavior users are seeing, and you'll have a better idea of what you think might need to happen. If you look, for example, at the Comcast incident that was mentioned earlier, that involved Comcast throttling some BitTorrent traffic in what Comcast itself said was reasonable network management, it actually took a long time for what was happening to come to light. It took a long time for members of the public to do experiments to diagnose what was happening. With an infrastructure like Measurement Lab, that time would be telescoped. People would know much more quickly what was actually happening on the network, and you'd have a much clearer factual idea of the situation. As it was months, really, from the time that people started to suspect that something was going on until the public and the policymakers had a clear picture. Measurement Lab can do that much more quickly. If, on the other hand, you believe that network neutrality regulation by government is not needed, if you believe that the market will handle this, that consumers will make market choices based on information about what happens, and that ISPs, in fact, will not have an incentive to behave in a harmful way, then you should also welcome Measurement Lab. Because what you are appealing to is a process of public discussion, that the operation of that market in which consumers move to the ISP that gives them the best performance and the best price performance deal, is a market that's facilitated by better information. That process of the market and publicity and public debate giving ISPs an incentive to behave in consumer-friendly ways also is fostered by consumers having good information about the different choices that they have. Now, this is an especially important, the existence of tools like this is also especially important for policymakers. If you recall the process in the FCC to talk about Comcast's network management, and it was really a process that was starved for strong factual evidence. There were assertions about what was happening, but there was not a lot of really well-established consensus facts about what was happening. Certainly, the existence of tools that anyone can use easily to see what's happening, the existence of independent researchers who can aggregate and use information about what's happening on different users' networks will lead to a better factual understanding of what's happening in the short run. In the long run, of course, the kind of benefits that Larry was talking about, of learning about how to build a better and more efficient network, of understanding what kind of innovations might be helpful and lead to a better internet for everyone, also will operate. And all of this I've been talking about really is in the US setting. Perhaps there are also perhaps even greater opportunities and potential benefits from a project like Measurement Lab in the international setting, where different national authorities, different national telecommunications and internet authorities are doing different things, and it would certainly be helpful for people for people around the world to know what's happening in their corner of the internet. Indeed, many debates about the internet and policy would benefit from more and better facts. Measurement Lab provides that. It lets anyone try and see what they see, and it provides a facility for aggregating information and for fostering a fact-based public debate about what's going on and about what government should do. So I'm eager to see this initiative succeed, and I hope to see it grow and more tools become available. Thanks.
So we can now open this up for questions, comments, both from, let me talk into the mic so people online can hear. We can open up for questions both from in the room and online, and I'll do my best to juggle both realms. But we'll start in here because you guys actually showed up. So questions for any of our panelists?
Here's one.
Yes.
You want to use a microphone so that
Yes.
you have a microphone there? It's coming. We only have one. We can timeshare here. So.
I was just,
Where you're from.
Irene Wu with the Federal Communications Commission. I was just curious, you had showed us when you go into Measurement Lab what happens if you go into the user's gateway, but what happens if you go into the researcher's gateway?
I can show you. So the question is, what happens if you go into the researcher's gateway? And the answer is, and again, this is all evolving as it's being rolled out here. Well, hopefully we'll see this.
Sure.
But it's basically different ways in which researchers can get involved with the project. So it talks a little bit about, from a slightly more technical side of, what it is that we're involved in, sort of what the infrastructure is like, and then different ways that you can kind of contact the team. Here it is. What we want to be very clear about is that this is a starting point. We've spent a hell of a lot of time on a modest rollout with a goal of expanding quickly. And at the same time, we're also a coalition of folks that wants to expand greatly this group. But go ahead,
There's a
Larry.
sizable research community out there that really focus on how can I build an experiment, basically, that if I just think, experiment of any sort, if I poke the network in the following ways, I will be able to conclude thus and thus. And they're building those tools and they're trying them out, and IMLab will give them a place to go harden them and see if they're really useful to people. It's a marketplace for these tools in the end.
Could I, just to expand on that a little bit, one of the things that makes it hard to understand what's going on in the net is that there are 1.5 billion people doing things to it all at the same time. And we don't have a separate internet on this scale that we can do experiments with. So the best that we can do is to produce, as Larry implied, a set of well-defined loads or certain other kinds of specific things that whose behavior we might try to predict even in the presence of all the other dynamics that are going on, and then get measurements back to help us refine our models. I go back to 1970 or 1969, in fact, at UCLA, when the predecessor to the internet, the ARPANET, was built. I was responsible for writing software in the Network Measurement Center. It was run by Leonard Kleinrock at UCLA. And the whole idea there was to inject load on the network and then compare the measured results with queuing theoretic models that were supposed to tell us what would actually happen. And we discovered very quickly that the sophistication of the queuing models was lacking compared to the complexity of behavior that you could induce, even in this simple 4-node network, let alone a system now that has hundreds of millions of computers and hundreds of thousands of networks. So this tool is not going to solve all the problems in the world, but it sure gives the researchers an opportunity to try more controlled experiments. And it was the Planet Labs measurement experiment control framework that drew our attention very quickly to what Larry and his colleagues had done. Okay. Other questions? Microphones are coming.
Hi, I'm Bill McGuire. I work for the House Committee on Small Business. My question is whether or not users are able to submit geographic information. I can imagine there would be benefits of that information to broadband mapping, but also you can imagine members of Congress being interested in different parts of their district having access. You can imagine a Huey Long type aspect of, when I come back to your neighborhood, you will have broadband at a much faster rate.
Right.
So is there such a thing, and if so, is it being collected?
So one immediate answer is that as long as, if you can map the internet addresses into a geographical location, then you can do something about aggregating the information that comes from a particular geographic area. Of course, remember that even in a particular geography, there may be multiple ISPs being served, so you still have a conflation, perhaps, of performance results. The internet was designed with no notion of geography at all. It was all topology. And what's happened is that the need to understand where things are has sort of emerged out of the usage of the system. And so people have had to retrofit a map to go from IP address to roughly where is that. Larry, you were about to say something.
I was just going to say there are tools like that, and hopefully we can refine those and make them better.
That's absolutely, I never would have thought of that idea. I mean, this is fascinating. Cool. That's what comes from thinking in political terms, right? Yeah. Got it. Okay, I took notes.
I am Bob Hershey. I'm a consultant. How typical was the run that we saw done in front of us compared to the runs that you did in building up the setup the way we see it?
How do you mean?
Was
Well, the
this
performance-
typical output today that we saw, or you saw different things when you ran it a few weeks ago?
Yeah, I mean, we did some stress testing on this last week. Activated a bunch of Googlers and other folks to just go and bang on it for a while. That's actually where that error that I just got here live, that's where it first manifested itself and then quickly disappeared when we tried to figure out why it was doing this. But yeah, so I would say, depending on your connection, you're going to get wildly different results, but they're going to be results about your connection. So I've tried it on a really marginal link and got that my link sucked, and other people have tried it, from like their supercomputing centers, and they're like, all green here. So it's entirely dependent upon where you're testing from. But Larry, do you want to?
Well, it's just symptomatic of the internet that it worked a minute ago.
Right.
And
Thanks, Larry. I really appreciate that.
but there are people configuring things all over the place, and I don't remember this if it's this particular thing, but some configuration could have been changed somewhere, and being able to track this over time, and now adding the metric of on-time departure kind of thing is something that we would hope to see come out of this.
Okay, so I've been doing some experiments too. I happen to have the good fortune to be in a place where I have multiple broadband servers available. So I have several services that I can run concurrently. So I started running some tests of these things, and the results vary dramatically. I mean, I was 30 megabits download sometimes, and then 5 megabits at other times. Uploads were varying all over the place. Part of the reason for that is that there are other people competing for those resources. So the reason that the MLab is actually important is that it can accumulate information over a period of time. Users would benefit not from necessarily knowing instantaneously what is the performance, but rather how has the performance looked, what envelope of performance do you get over a period of time. That may be really important when you're trying to compare what you believe you were buying in the way of service and what the ISPs claimed it was delivering to you. The only way you can really see that in a useful way is to see over a time period, what average were you getting, what was the peak, what was the least data rate you were getting, or delay, or other metric. So this is useful because of the fact that you can aggregate the information and not simply do a one-shot test and say, well, that's my performance, because it won't be.
Ed, did you want to respond?
Actually, this is an important point, I think, about gathering information over time and also gathering information across space. There's kind of an analogy here to public health, where you get a different kind of information impelling a different kind of action when you have data across the population over a period of time. And you might see things that you don't see in the health world looking at a single patient one at a time. And the hope is that some of that kind of knowledge will come out of efforts like this.
So I can just see the analytical results now. One of them says your connection sucks, and the other one says the internet is sick. So we have a nice, long, varied and analytical language that we can see emerging from all this process.
Sure. And I should note that all the tools on Measurement Lab are open source, so we do anticipate that people will build additional modular functionality onto these things over time to increase its accessibility and usability to the other 99.99% of the population that doesn't live and breathe this stuff like our panelists here. We have an online question here, and I apologize in advance if I crush this name, but Fayaza says, the tool seems to provide evidence about ISPs doing undesirable things to people's traffic. If an ISP or some middle-tier provider is identified as doing bad things, what happens next? Would the consortium take the initiative to contact the ISP or file a formal complaint, etc.?
Ed doesn't want to respond. Okay. Hey, you're supposed to be the policy wonk. Okay, so first observation I would make is that none of these tools are guaranteed to be absolutely correct in their evaluation. This is a kind of a collaborative effort. But my first thought is that if there is some indication of persistent anomalous behavior, that the natural thing, the first thing to happen would be the consumer could ask, here's the data, here's what I'm getting from this tool, can you help me understand this relative to the service I thought I was getting? I don't believe that the consortium has been set up, at least I don't believe it has been set up to be a law enforcement arm or a lobbying group or some organization that goes after any particular ISP. It's intended, as was said several times, to provide, to the best of its ability, factual information that people can use in analyzing what they are seeing in terms of performance and response time and bandwidth and the like. So I don't think that the consortium would take a deliberate action. It's there to provide information for others who would like to be able to use this factual information to pursue their end goals. Is that a fair summary for everybody else? Okay. I don't see Derek is not levitating out of his chair, so that must be okay too. And our chief counsel over here, Rick Witt, says that's okay. All right. Thank you, Rick.
To put it succinctly, the goal of MLab is really to provide information, to increase transparency on what's happening on the internet. It's not to be actively involved in using that ammo. It's just generating research results. So we have a question here.
Hi, my name is Cora Dixon. I'm with the Department of Commerce. And actually, my question was related to the previous one, so I wanted to follow up. I was sort of curious whether you had a fleet of lawyers dealing with the possibility that if the information, the facts that you gathered turn out to be not true, what if an ISP wanted to sue you for defamation or something? I mean, just as a possibility, the idea of aggregating all this information together, it was fine in the NSF days, but now that we're in this commercial environment, is there a plan for dealing with that situation? I think it would be great if the consumers do have that information available to them, but if they're relying on faulty information, then it could come back to haunt you.
So my first thought, of course, is that that we would have to say to anyone using this information that there is a potential uncertainty about the precision and accuracy of the data. And we already know, personal experience, that you'll see quite varied results. And if you take a small sample and make assertions about it, you may be quite wrong. How many times have you seen assertions about the mileage of the car, and then at the bottom it says, your mileage may vary? So I think caveat emptor is fair here. On the other hand, for many of us involved in this project, purpose is not to punish. The purpose here is it's what Dick Hamming said. He's a network analyst guy. He said the purpose of numbers, of measurement, is not numbers. The purpose of measurement is insight. And I hope that we'll be able to use the information to say there are anomalies that are showing up. Can we understand them better? And it seems to me that any ISP that's offering service would want to understand those anomalies as much as any user would.
I'll go to, you want to follow up with that?
Just a quick, now pass it. It's critically important that these tools are in the source code is in the public domain. We have 1,000 eyes on it, so it's not my proprietary tool says this is going on, but the entire scientific community at least is looking at this code.
This is a key point, that the tool being open, people can look at it, and if it's not doing what it should do to measure, anyone is welcome to complain. You can have a debate about that.
I could, one other thought, I can imagine that an ISP who feels that the evaluation or analysis or whatever is does not reflect what is going on could then say, this tool biases the result because, here's how you measure it, this is how we understand the system is working. The tool presents the data in a biased way. Maybe not intentionally, it's just that the system didn't work the way the tool thought it did. So if we can maintain this kind of a healthy, open dialogue, and we're back to transparency and discussion, then this kind of activity will benefit everybody, including the ISPs. I see a hand up over there.
Well, let me go back to online real quick.
Okay.
So Vint mentioned something about, this is from Edward, about the outset about transparency at all layers of the net. But clearly we're focused on the physical layer. Are the tools helpful for increasing transparency at other layers, and how?
Absolutely.
Wanna take this slide?
Yeah, so these are not tools running on MLab today, but we have tools running on Planet Lab that participate at the application level for the sake of understanding everything about the network up to that point. These actually can be a bit problematic because now your DNS, your name server, is receiving not legitimate name requests, but a probe, and that might upset you. And so there are all sorts of issues as the research probing moves up the stack and starts to look like real client-server traffic, but it was really just there to try to measure something. You get into all kinds of issues here, but yeah, there are tools that go up and down the stack and try to probe. I'll give you another example just because it's a thorn in my side. If you want to understand and gain insights about peer-to-peer traffic, like BitTorrent, you might try to participate in a BitTorrent swarm for the sake of measuring how the swarm works. Except then you have the potential of running afoul of people watching who's downloading what BitTorrent movies. And so this is a place where the research comes in conflict with copyright ownership. And no, I wasn't distributing that content, I was just trying to measure the content. Lots of issues there as you move up the stack from the safe place where you're just working with the bits.
We'll go right here, and then we'll go in the back.
Hi, David Young with Verizon, and I had a question related to the application issue, and that's performance from an end user perspective is pretty dramatically affected by the performance of their computer, both its technical capabilities as well as how long it's been running and those sorts of things. So to what extent do the tools how are they affected by the performance of the end user's computer?
A well-designed tool will need to account for that. I mean, there are many variables, you need to account for all of them.
So actually, you may have inadvertently put your finger on another hot button for me. And it has to do with the ability to capture and document the configuration of things. It's unbelievably hard to do that. And in many scientific disciplines, you use an instrument and you gather data, and then you didn't collect all the information about the state of the instrument, whether it was calibrated by what and when, and so on. So you don't quite know how to evaluate the results. So you're absolutely right. This is critical. If this particular MLab discipline, let me call it that, causes us to find ways to get automatically to capture configuration information, it would be enormously helpful. Imagine the guy on the other end of the phone call trying to figure out why this fella isn't, or gal isn't getting what he or she expected, and has exactly that question in mind. Well, which version of the operating system are you running? How much memory do you have? What's the fragmentation on the disk? All of those variables, as Larry said, potentially have an impact. So figuring out how to disentangle that's important. The other thing which I think is really valuable is that we may be able to reproduce experiments. And anytime you can reproduce and repeat something which exhibits an anomaly, where multiple people can demonstrate the problem, the easier it is to try to sort out what's causing that. So this is just another one of those really great opportunities to do a good job, or to screw it up. I mean, if we do it wrong.
I keep hoping that if I sacrifice a chicken, this thing's gonna work, but it works for you. All right. So NDT actually does collect and say, oh, well, your bottleneck is at the client edge of this equation, and so absolutely, people are paying attention to the notion that we don't want to just say it's always outside of your own local area network, because we understand that that's not often the case. So in the back, you've been waiting patiently.
I'm Jeff Alexander with New Economy Strategies. I have a couple of related questions. One is, can you talk about the implications of this for network security research, like mapping, denial of service attacks? And also, a lot of the goals of this are very similar to what I've heard for GENI, the Global Environment for Network Innovation program that was proposed to the NSF, and I'm wondering if there's any relationship to that program with this effort.
Anybody want to jump in on that?
Talk about the security one.
Okay, go for it.
There are benefits for security research, certainly. One of the impacts of various kinds of security attacks, such as botnets, is that they generate activity. And if there's some background activity on a network or in a particular area of the network, you might get some insight into that through tools like this. So I think it provides some value, although certainly tools that are designed to monitor, particularly directly for security issues, are also pretty valuable.
So I have one particular scenario that I wish I had a tool for, and maybe there is one, I should know about it. But if your machine has become infected, it's not always obvious. Particularly if it's being carefully managed as part of a large botnet, it may be putting out one or two messages or one or two TCP probes or something in the background, per second or per minute that you'd never notice. It's one of the values of the botnet army guy is not to overload any one machine, so no one whose machine has been compromised notices it. So one of the things that I found, wish I had, was the ability to look at the envelope of traffic that's going in and out of my machine and kind of characterize it as stuff that I would normally expect because I was running the following applications, and stuff that I wasn't expecting because that wasn't part of the application that I thought I was running. And the guys who infect these machines work really hard to hide which applications are running. Sometimes they actually suppress your ability to see which processes are generating data, but they can't hide the fact that the data is going in and out of the machine. So the ability to capture that information and maybe have someone else analyze it. I mean, I wouldn't argue that I could analyze this adequately myself anymore, if I ever could. But there are people who are experts at this sort of thing. Ed probably knows a bunch of them, and so does Larry and others. So people could be aided in discovering whether their machines are infected, even if you can't figure it out by running through the source code or running through the operating code of the machine, because the infection is so well hidden. So actually, this could be a really cool opportunity for helping people discover they have an infected machine. So of course, the next question will be what we do now, right? And it's an important question to try to answer, because de-infecting a machine is sometimes hard.
So I could say two words about GENI. At one time, GENI was envisioned to be the Uber platform for which all network research could happen. I think that vision has scaled back, and it's an ecosystem of facilities, of which I would view MLab as an important one.
Thank you. That's good.
Any last questions? Take one more right there.
Rich Clark, AT&T. I'm excited to try to go home and use the tool and see what happens. But just picking up on one other thing that Dave Young was talking about the contribution of the end user's computer to issues. At the other side, there's the issue of how the speed of light, how physically far the signal has to travel, as well as maybe load on the measurement server. Are those things going to be reported so it's possible to disentangle all pieces of the issue?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that was one reason that MLab stands separate from Planet Lab. One of the contributing factors is that we didn't have sufficient control over being able to say this is exactly what the back-end server machine was able to provide you, because we had too many users doing too many different things. This is exactly, we are going to be able to say precisely, you are getting this much service out of the server, and this is the impact that will have. This is calibrating your instrument that Ben was referring to, yeah.
So I'm sorry, I just keep jumping in because this is so much fun. One of the things that I get very excited about is getting absolute location information, GPS stuff and things like that. And the other is having really, really good clock time, real time, not the relative time that's inside the machine, but real clock time from WWVB or from NIST or something. If we can get really good timing information from all the various pieces, then we can have a very clear understanding of how long did it take for things to get from point A to point B. And being able to get that kind of data in the past has been very difficult, and it's a wonderful way of understanding deeply exactly how long something took as opposed to only relative measures. So there are opportunities here for inventing some really cool infrastructure that makes measurement more valuable. And I can hardly wait to turn this thing loose for other people to start finding new ways of capturing or providing information.
Very good. Well, we're going to wrap up. Do you have any final thoughts, words of wisdom, ideas?
Yeah, I got one. In October and November of last year, the first leg of the interplanetary internet went into operation. And I'm just sitting here thinking, oh my God, round trip time delays at 40 minutes. This is going to be really weird. So I don't know whether we'll be able to test the MLab on the interplanetary leg, but boy, that will be interesting.
Very good. Larry?
I'm not going to try to top that.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you all for coming out here. I would be very remiss if I didn't thank a couple of key folks. First and foremost is the researchers that have taken part in MLab. They're providing the grist for this mill. Without them, we would be nowhere, just waxing philosophical to ourselves. So thank you all so much for taking part in this. Vint for being the catalyst to bring this all together and make it actually happen. I know there's been discussions about this going back almost eons, it seems like.
Hey, you have to be fair. Derek Slater is the spark plug, so Derek, take a bow.
I'm getting to him.
And you notice
Derek
he's wearing
Slater
a three-piece suit, too. We're trying very hard to start a new practice at Google. It's very uphill, I can tell you that.
That's right. Derek has been my co-conspirator on this and has done an enormous alliance. He's actually the godfather, and Vint and I are both looking over at him like, is that all right? Yeah, he's been the great organizer and logistical guru on this. And finally, Stephen Mansour, who put his life on hold and developed sort of the online components of this for us to really show it off on a ridiculously short schedule. Larry?
And Mark Buzinski, who in the Planet Lab staff has been putting the lion's share of the effort.
And Stephen Stewart is our principal engineer at Google, who's been doing the actual legwork. I just followed his footsteps. We have a couple others, Meredith Whitaker at Google, who've done great work too.
Right, so hopefully you get a feel that this is a very large group of people that are all collaborating actively with one another under this guise of openness and transparency and making these data available to everyone. So thank you all for coming out.